right, well, we'll go ahead and get started here, and let me pray, and then I'll introduce our guest for the night. Gracious Lord, we thank you for people who serve, whether they serve in the church or in the community or in their household. We know that you ask us to have a servant's heart, and so we ask that you give each of us the chance and the opportunity to serve so that our hearts are in line with yours, and that you help us to understand what peace and reconciliation and love are all about, so that we can go out in the world and serve in that manner. Enlighten us and enliven us in our discussion tonight. We make this prayer in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Well, let me see. If you're on speaker view, I will spotlight me for a second, and that helps for our thing. Welcome. We're glad that you're here. I think we've been doing this enough weeks now that I don't need to remind everybody of the ground rules or the goal. But I would remind everybody that of that form that's on the website, the post-session reflection form, to go through those questions and think about what you learned here tonight. Next week, we will have our last one where we read a handout and then discuss the handout. That's going to be about, I think the topic next week is segregation on Sunday mornings. And, do segregated churches imply racism? And so we're going to have that discussion next week. Then the following week, we don't have any other agenda other than to discuss where do we go from here. After we've had these conversations all summer, it's not just enough to think and reflect. Thinking and reflection needs to lead to action. And so we are going to have a conversation about how do we make this moment in race relations in our country different. There's been a lot of times in the past when a lot of people have gotten together and thought about it, reflected on it, but then haven't done anything about it. We don't want that to be the case. We want to do something to make things better in the world. So that'll be August the 12th. We will have that conversation. If you are from Knoxville, which a lot of you are, our guest tonight needs really no introduction. He has been a Knoxville icon for 35 years, making music and contributing to the arts and culture in Knoxville. So he's very well known in our community. And in recent years, he's been using his gifts of music to help engage the conversations around race. He's been writing songs and putting on concerts to make people think about racial issues, and then hosting conversations following those concerts where people are open and honest with one another about racial issues. He did one of those at our church in July, a couple of years ago, I think now. And so we invited him to be part of our panel of facilitators. And so I will turn it over to Mr. Wendel Werner, and he will take it from here. Wendel, I will tell you that we've got on here, I know you probably don't know most of the people on here. We've got probably 7 different churches represented here in at least 3 different states as I'm looking. So there's
so
people here from all over.
Oh, well, then hello, everybody. How is everybody doing? I hope everybody's well. Good.
Hope you play some music for us.
I don't know how things have gone thus far in all of your Wednesday night meetings. So I'm not positive as to how long your host or your guest, I should say, has spoken at the top of the meeting. I don't plan to speak very long. I plan to say pretty much one sentence and then see where we go from there. And that sentence is this. I'm reading I've read the thing that I was supposed to read. Is affirmative action still needed? And my answer is, if it wasn't, then we wouldn't be talking about it.
Okay.
Who has comments on that?
Anyone?
Nobody?
All right, thanks.
I was interested in one of the alternative discussions in the article, because as a middle-aged white privileged person growing up in a small town, The only thing a lot of the things I'd heard about affirmative action were that, sometimes it kept a deserving person out of the position just because they had to hire somebody of another color. And I had heard that. I didn't necessarily agree with it, but I'd heard it a lot. So I was really interested to see how the article flipped that and explained why that, looked at it from a different perspective. That was really interesting to me.
Sure. Let me suggest that while I understand that the basis of these conversations is race, I would encourage gender be part of that conversation. Mm-hmm. So that we are being inclusive of all people. I don't know, even though affirmative action initially was meant to be about race, in hearing what was just said, someone didn't get the job because we had to hire a person of another color. That could apply to women as well.
Absolutely.
Right. Now, with that said, here's the thing about what affirmative action is trying to accomplish. It's trying to make things on this is going to be a very general statement, but it's trying to make things equal on a playing field. Well, you don't make things equal without someone giving up something. Otherwise, it will never be equal.
That's right.
Right. So that means that somebody who has been a good person for the job doesn't get the job. That's not new to African Americans. Now, that may not be new to white Americans.
No, it's not.
But if there's something called affirmative action, then it's been African Americans that have had to deal with that more often.
Probably.
Right. Yeah. And now I need to say this first before we go further. My profession is probably a little bit different than the corporate world in terms of how this is dealt with. Now, don't misunderstand me. I've lost a lot of gigs and had to go through a lot of perceived impressions when I walk into a room. And people say, "Oh, we're hearing reggae music today." That has happened.
Okay.
Oh, boy.
I didn't find it humorous.
I'm sure. No, it's true.
But that has happened. So my situation is probably a little bit different than what you would have in the corporate world, in the office scenario. It doesn't mean that I don't understand the situation. It just means that if someone tonight says, "Well, how did you encounter this?" I don't know that my answers are going to be, they're going to fit maybe some of the things that were in the handout. I can speak to you about things I have heard, people that I know who have been in situations. But if you're going to ask me about my personal situations, they're going to be a little bit different than what we're talking about here.
Wendell, I'm seeing Margaret Massey-Cox has her hand up.
Okay. I am seeing me, so I'm not sure what you're talking about, but go ahead.
So your original question was, is it needed? And in a system where white males hold most of the power, I find it impossible that they will give that power up willingly without something as a catalyst, like affirmative action. Thank you.
Yeah, you're right about that. I think that it's not going to be given up easily. What frustrates me about this is you saying without a catalyst, like affirmative action. Well, according to the handout, affirmative action was in place. Wait a second, let me find this out. In 1941, and then again in 1953, and then again in 1961, and then we're talking about it here. Now, all those things had catalysts, and then we had all the situations in the 60s, and then we had Black Power in the 70s. Then we had Rodney King. You know, how many catalysts do we need? Mr. Reynolds had to talk me in here today, because when he first asked me about this, I told him my tendency was to say no, because the Black Lives Matter movement has pissed me off so much. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but it's gone now. So because while it was good to see, my thinking all along was, where have you been?
Mm-hmm.
It would be nice to have a catalyst. You've had catalysts.
Yep.
That is valid. That is very valid.
Marty McLean.
Well,
Hi, Marty.
I guess I'm of a couple of minds on this. Number one, I got my master's degree from Tennessee State University, and I know companies have called me in because they want to fill a black slot in their company, and they're always surprised when I walk in and they try to figure out how this guy doesn't look very black at all.
Yep.
So you know that's one side of it, the kind of frustration with this is, on one side, you got to give preferential treatment to people who have been denied equal treatment, and all too often that turns into cheapening the degree or the position for a person that received it due to affirmative action, which is a frustration. I've heard that over and over again. Well, the only reason he got the job is because he's black, and you want to turn it around and say, well, the only reason everybody else got the job is because they're white. So, that's the other side of it. So I don't know. I'm always been in the midst of a dilemma on affirmative action and how you accomplish anything in a meaningful manner here.
Thank you. Well said, and enjoy San Francisco.
Enjoy San Francisco.
I can't get that off. I keep trying to change it. I was on a desert island for 2 weeks. Now I'm in.
Never leaving San Francisco. It's a Twilight Zone episode. Okay, so I completely hear where you're coming from. I think that to some extent that's a valid comment until you say, well, someone only got the job because they're black. When a white person gets a job, do we ask about their credentials? Do we say, hey, I'm curious to know what kind of background you have since you got the job? I can't recall me ever being in a situation where I asked that question. Yeah. You're right. You went to a predominantly black school. And unfortunately, somebody looked at a piece of paper and assumed something about you. Welcome to the club. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you've walked in and you've seen the surprised look on people's face when they look at you and they look down at the piece of paper and then they go, oh, and they start to sit differently. Oh, welcome.
Yeah.
How you doing? Welcome to the club. How many catalysts do we need?
Well, I think the key is, what kind of catalyst do we need? Not how many.
I've got a hand up.
Okay, sure. I'll go with that. How many different catalysts have there been? I mean, what you just talked about is a catalyst. That should let somebody, because I'm with you. The person who looked at you when you walked in should not have said we were trying to fill a black spot. That should not have happened.
Yeah.
That should not have happened. If we're going to use affirmative action, which means hire black people, if we're going to use affirmative action and we're going to the trouble of changing the wording so that it looks nicer, then let's act that way. then let's act that way. Yeah, you should not have been in that position. Welcome to the club.
One of the Peebles has their hand up.
Liz Peebles.
Oh.
Liz?
I find that after having these sessions, my view of affirmative action is much more positive than it was before.
Okay.
But what would help me would be to hear from some of our friends of color if they know of someone who has benefited from affirmative action. And that would be nice to hear.
Sure. I'm going to tell you that I'm sure they're out there. And I think this is one of the situations that may work against what we're trying to talk about here, in respect that a lot of my friends are in the arts. They're in music, or they're in theater, or they're are painters, or things of that nature. They're some sort of musicians, even Tim. And so that's not a circumference I'm in very often.
It's not.
And also, to be honest with you, when I come across a Black lawyer or insurance agent or something else along those lines, I don't ask the questions. I'm just happy to see them.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
and I don't make it a point to think, oh, it's a Black person. Like, I don't make it a point to think, oh, it's a white person. I really try hard to think, oh, here's a lawyer, a female lawyer, a Latino lawyer. I go out of my way to see to it that I don't think that way, and I will call myself out on it if I do. And I will welcome someone to call me out on it if I do. Mr. Reynolds knows that I will, even my closest friends, I'll be very quick to say, hey, the story that you're telling, and you just said that you know this Black guy, is that part of the story? Is that necessary to the story, or are you just throwing that out there? You know, I think that's where we're trying to get to, affirmative action wise, is that we have people employed who are people employed. But we can't get there until we shake this up. Now, let me go on and say this. And I'm probably one of the few African Americans that's going to say this, so make sure you get a screenshot. Demographically, there's more of you than there is us. So how equal things are going to be is kind of difficult. Simply because of numbers, that's going to be kind of difficult. That means that if we want to see more Black people in jobs, then the white person is going to have to give up something.
Yeah.
I was going to kind of speak to that as a retired teacher. Something just kind of popped in my head, and my mom and I were talking about it just for a moment. To what extent, when you hear, well, the Black guy got the job because of affirmative action, to what extent is that piece of the puzzle traced back to inequities in educational process? Like, are we failing our young men, women of color, our young women of any color, our young men of any color? Are we failing them to educate them and prepare them to compete for those jobs? I mean, it should get to a point where it shouldn't matter. Where it should be your credentials. Are we failing to educate them so that they're ready?
I'm saying yeah to your question, as in I understand what you're saying.
Okay.
But I think to a certain extent that's the yes is also the same answer. Let me offer this bit of information and then maybe delve deeper. When Obama was elected president, someone that I was teaching at a community college, and my direct boss came up to me that day and said, well, congratulations. What does this feel like for you that there's an African-American president. And I said, there's not an African-American president. There is a president. Now, if you speak to my mother, you have an African-American president.
Okay.
Because my mother was raised thinking that was never, ever going to happen. She lived through a point of going to the bathroom in specific places, drinking water in specific places, sitting in certain places in a restaurant. She had reason to believe that an African-American would never be president. So to my mom, we have an African-American president all day long. She should think that way. I was not brought up to think that way. If you don't see people in a position that you want to be in, you won't think you can do it.
Interesting. Right.
I have, I'm sorry,
No, go ahead.
me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I have been asked to come and speak to elementary, middle school kids before. It was, I used to complain if people asked me about coming for Black History Month, because I would say that we were around more than just 1 month. What would you like for me to say? You know, but someone I knew at the time said, if you don't go during those times, then you don't say that. You don't get the chance to say those things. Okay, so I went to, so there were several schools that I would go to, and I remember looking at Sarah Moore Green, I think that's the school, Sarah Moore Green. It's a predominantly Black elementary school, and I was talking about being a teacher, and one of the kids raised their hand and said, wait, you teach, at the time I did, you teach at the University of Tennessee? And I said, yes. We can do that?
Oh.
That was literally a question that was asked.
Oh.
I took a group of kids. I was in charge of the jazz choir at UT, the UT Singers, and I took them to perform at Austin East High School. And they always had a question and answer period afterwards. And all the kids in the group were white kids. At the time, all the kids in the group were white kids. And someone asked about what they would have to do to get into this group if they came to UT. And I said, well, yeah, you would have to audition. You would talk to me, and depending on the audition, you could be in the group. And the person looked at me and said, I could be in that group?
Oh, my stars.
Now, I hear the reactions from some of you as I'm saying this. You're bewildered. You are appalled that someone would think this, but we've been thinking this a long, long time.
Yeah.
Right.
This is not new. This is not, hey, in the past couple of weeks or since George Floyd, we've started thinking this. This has been since 1950, 41, and 53, and 61. You know, we've been here. How many catalysts do you need?
I'm seeing the Peebles hand up again, and the McLean's. See if there's somebody else first, since they've already gone.
Well, that's me this time.
Oh, okay. All right, Neil.
I read an article last week in the New York Times, and it was really interesting because they had a number of people commenting about the process of auditioning for classical orchestras, and that usually that takes place behind a screen. And there were a number of people, including the chief classical music critic of the Times, Tomasini, arguing that the screen ought to be taken down. Mr. Werner, what do you think about that?
I think that you should call me Wendell instead of Mr. Werner. Let's start.
All right, Wendell.
Let's start there. You had me looking around. Yeah, I would start off by saying to whoever is in charge of that particular audition why they would have the screen up. Maybe there's something in the process that I don't know about, or they don't know about, that makes that valid. Off the top of my head, I'm not sure what that would be, but that doesn't mean that they don't have something that I'm unaware of, or maybe that's just been a tradition that has not been changed. I don't know. Maybe the screen is for the purposes of making sure that you're hiring someone based on their musicianship and not how they look.
Well, that's as is it that it's understood.
Well,
I think they were saying that.
okay, but understand this. There are going to be some who are going to say, hey, if I'm sitting in the audience of an orchestra and there is someone in the first violin section, that means they're going to be to my left, they're going to be closer to the audience. There's someone in the first violin section who is very, very overweight. I couldn't enjoy it because I was too busy looking at her all night long. Now, there will be somebody in the musician world that lets that thinking get into their head and say, okay, well, maybe we should consider where they should be placed. It shouldn't happen. You're absolutely right. It shouldn't happen. That's not even a racial thing. It shouldn't happen. But that doesn't mean it doesn't happen. Now, having the screen up means that you are, you're not hiring based on any looks. That's a good thing. But to hint that that is not taken in consideration by some orchestras would be wrong. It would be incorrect, an incorrect practice, but it would be wrong. They would say, we don't ever do that, and they would be lying. I'm not saying it's everywhere. I'm not saying it's every orchestra. I'm not saying it's most orchestras. I'm saying if you go across every symphony orchestra in the United States, you're going to find one that's going to talk around the issue.
Wow.
Bev.
Hi there.
I was trying to figure out how to unmute. Lord bless. Okay, can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So, a friend of mine, this conversation that we're having, a friend of mine had posted something on Facebook about how old were you when you had your first non-white teacher. And that subject, that question has like had me like spiraling all day thinking about it. For me, the answer was college. And it led me back to our previous conversation about how you learned history. And it made me question like my whole education, basically. And so, you know, just this conversation of who should be now I understand, like, I'm from a very small town. I understand there, you know, but I don't know, y'all, like, it's just hit me this week. And that simple question of how different, even like how different our white children could be educated if they were given a variety of thoughts.
You're absolutely right. And
you know,
well, first of all, is Bev?
Yeah.
Okay,
Beverly,
hey Bev.
Bev, whatever you want to, it's fine.
I'm sorry, Beth, B-E-T-H?
No, it's B-V.
B-E-V, okay. Okay, hey, I really like the integration that's going on the nail. So it looks like it's white.
Oh, thanks.
You're mixing people up. I like that.
I didn't do that on purpose, but yeah, thanks. My lead.
Roll with it. Yeah, just okay. So
I did that on purpose. Yeah, thanks.
You are absolutely correct. I can't tell you how many times that Pastor Reynolds and I have gone into a movie that was about something that happened in our American history that had to do with race that no one knew anything about. And we came out of there with our hands up in the air saying, why was this not in our history books? I can't tell you how many times that has happened. You are right in the respect that having so many different points of view can help the person. Allow me to give this analogy. I have had many people bring their piano students to me and say, they're taking piano, they're taking classical music, but they want to learn some other things too, but I don't know if that's going to be a good idea or not. You know, you play lots of different styles. What do you think? And I always say, let's talk about Batman. And that always gives the same reaction that I'm positive you all have right now. So allow me to explain. I say, if you're familiar with the DC universe, go with me. If you're familiar with the DC universe, you've got Superman, you've got Green Lantern, you've got Flash, you've got all these very, very powerful people. And the one that they all fear is Batman, the one with no powers. You know why? Because Batman got himself to a point where he studied everything possible to be the best person he could ever be. Everyone else had some kind of power that helped him out. This person went and studied over here and then learned something from over here and then learned something from over here and learned something from over there. And now he's the one that knows everything more so than Superman and Green Lantern. And I said, you want to be, as a piano player, you want to be Batman. You want to get as much information as possible. As a student, wouldn't you want to be Batman? Wouldn't you want to be in a situation where you could learn from an Asian teacher and a white teacher and a black teacher so that you could have as well-rounded information to go out into the world?
Right. So I guess my question, and I'm following you 100% because we're total nerds here. I got my Star Wars nursery wallpaper like that came in today. I'm pumped about it. Anyway, that's the exciting thing in my world today. Star Wars wallpaper.
Corona.
But my question is then for, you know, I am a mother of 1.5 white children. So ensuring and trying to figure out and how to do better by them, because not that my parents didn't, that sounds bad, but to try to figure that out while also integrating them around people who have different opinions and different thoughts and different colors and different, how do we do better, I guess. And I guess that feels unfair because I feel like it's the thing that we've been saying of asking people of color to help us figure that out. I'm trying to figure it out myself. But yeah, that's where I'm sitting this week. I'm just I've been sitting with that.
Yeah, it's a fair question. It's a question that I've been bothered about since the Black Lives Movement came around, because a lot of my friends reached out to me and said, hey, you know, what can we do? And I thought, how long have we been friends? You're just now asking me this question. But I wasn't bothered. I didn't say this to a large extent to that circle of friends because they've been my friends. They're all white guys. They've been my friends for the past 30, 40, 100 years. So I've been in their houses. I've met their families. I know their children. That's where I would start. Do you have friends that are of another gender or another race? Bring them in your house. Let your kids see. Do you have friends that are homosexuals? Bring them into your house. Hang out with them. Go to meals with them. Let people see that they are people, not something that get beat up on TV.
Right.
But they are people. And that could mean, okay, so if you don't have black friends, all right, well, are there any TV shows that have black people on them? The answer is yes. You know, so you can be watching those. Are there movies that are black-centric? Is there artwork that is black-centric? Or doesn't have to be black, it just needs to be made by a black person. Because it's possible you could look at the art and not know. That's possible. But know that, or I'm trying to make sure I say this correctly. Getting someone to understand that this is a race of people, not a race. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That this is a race of people. This is a group of people, not a race that is over there. We live in segregated neighborhoods. It's easy to think they're over there. When schools meet and then they start in the middle of the day to have lunch. They sit in segregated areas. They do that to themselves because it's all they know.
Right.
And until someone says, hey, let's mix this up, which is what we're saying with the affirmative action thing. Until someone says, let's mix this up, it's going to be all that anyone knows. And then if you if you continue to keep any person or group of people in one spot for very long, then we can't blame them when they get mad.
Right.
The analogy that I made to a lot of people when they came to me and said, I don't understand the Black Lives Matter movement. I said, if this were a woman who was married, who was continually told that she didn't matter and that she wasn't important, and then she decided that somewhere along the line she was going to do something to change all that, regardless of what it was, whether it was violent or getting up and leaving. If the wife said, I'm done with this, there would be a lot of people standing behind him going, you go, girl.
Mm-hmm.
Matt Casey has his hand up. Matt,
How's the
you're
game? I said, how's the game?
You're muted there. No,
still muted.
you're still muted.
It's
Now
not.
can you hear me?
There you go. Yeah.
All right, sorry about that, Wendell. Now I wish
No
I was at the game, or any game for that matter.
Yes.
I had a question, and then I'll be rude, ask you a question, and then make a comment. But first, in terms of the question, I am curious. You mentioned earlier your experience being quite different as an artist or a musician. So I would like to have you expand on that a little bit, just to, how does it work in that world in terms of affirmative action or lack thereof? So I'm curious about that. And then I'd also like to say, just from personal experience, one thing, and I'll be the first to admit, and by no means an expert, I think Dean Farmer's on the call. He may be able to truly speak to this, but one problem I've always felt with affirmative action in terms of the impact it has is, going back to Kennedy, when that law was enacted, it was initially enforced for government employees and then government contractors and ultimately large corporations. And the irony, if you ever study U.S. economy, is small businesses make up the largest percentage of employers. And what a lot of people don't understand when it comes to things like ADA, benefits, EEOC, those kind of things, if your company has 50 or less employees, the expectation and standards you have to follow is totally different from a legal sense. So there's a large percentage of the American workforce that doesn't even have the enforcement in place to work with things like affirmative action. And then my other comment, and I fall into that category, I work for a smaller company, and we have made a concerted effort because of a lot of the reasons mentioned in that article. There's benefit in the workplace to diversity, whether that's gender or race, just to get various ideas, to better reflect your customers, et cetera. In my company, we've done a very good job in the equity of male to female, and we've done a very poor job in terms of race. And a lot of that is, and I think this is probably more unique to East Tennessee than other parts of the country, we have very few African-American applicants. And so it's not even, we had 10 applicants and we specifically didn't pick the one that was African-American. We had 10 applicants and 8 were white and 2 were Indian.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was kind of rambling, but that was my 2 cents.
Yeah, Matt, right? Is that the name?
Yes.
Yeah,
Right.
Matt, I think those are very, very good points. I didn't know that information about the small businesses, and I should because I'm a self-employed musician, so I'm the smallest business you can find. But I think you bring up a good point. And where are those applicants? That's another good point. You want to make a difference, but then they don't show up. So and I could say, it's easy for me to sit here in my basement and say, well, then, make sure that you advertise for these things in Black neighborhoods or what. Yeah, but you are very valid in saying, we're trying to make a difference. We would like to make a difference. The people are not coming. To that, I might say, be patient. To that, I might say, maybe they don't know. Maybe they're nervous, maybe they're scared, maybe there's just people not trained for your jobs in your area.
Right. Well,
Without knowing more about the situation, I don't know if I can say much more about that, other than I think your comments are very, very valid. About the situation that I am in, or the situations that I have been in, let me give you a few circumstances, and I'll try to mix them up. Teaching at UT, I taught a class called The History of Rock and Roll for about 15 years at UT. And I remember halfway through a semester, after a particular class, a woman of Arab descent came up to me and very, very serious and said, "Why do you hate white people?" And I said, pardon me, what? Why do you hate white people? And I said, "Why do you think I hate white people?" She said, "Well, because you keep talking about how the white people stole things from black people in this music." I said, "Well, honey, they did. That's history. That's not my first one. My record collection, my album collection has a lot of white people in it. I don't hate white people. I'm just telling you the truth. It's funny that you would just assume that that was the case." At the same time, there was a semester where I had some Asian people come up to me and say, "I have learned more about American culture through this class than any other thing that I have seen or done since I've been in this country." So, I mean, it just depends on the perspective. I have walked into several bars in order to play with the band that was playing there. Me being the only black person in the band. And I've walked into the bar and have had people stop me and say, "Yeah, can I help you?" Many other people walking in, I'm carrying stuff. I'm carrying stuff. "Can I help you?" "Yeah, I'm with the band tonight." Oh, okay, fine. But other people were carrying stuff. You didn't stop them.
Right.
There was a place, I don't know if it's still around, that's maybe about 20 miles from here in Knoxville, that I went in one night and was playing with this band. Again, I'm the only black person in the band. Between the first set and the second set, two people came into the club wearing t-shirts of pictures of Klan members and the writing that said "Boys in the Hood."
Oh.
Now, I went to, this is not funny. I went to the band member, I went to the band leader and I said, "Hey, there are these people that are back there, and I've seen them wearing these things, and just so you're aware that I don't plan to be on stage as long as they are in the building." He said, "I understand." He went to the owner of the club and said, "Look, there's this issue and I want my keyboard player playing, but you got these guys." The owner came up to me and said, "What if we keep them in the back so there's not trouble? Are you okay with that?" And I said, I need you to understand this. I believe in everybody having rights to be wherever they want to be. They have freedom of speech. They can wear whatever they want to wear. They can be wherever they want to be. They have freedom of speech. My issue is helping to make money for you that would allow someone in here. That I'm not going to do. Those idiots can come in, but they paid to hear me, so they're stupid, But the owner, you are saying that that's okay, and I'm helping you make money. I can't do that.
Right.
Yeah, it's been in several angles, from several different avenues that I've had to see it. Someone speak to me about, I'm looking for a piano player for my wedding. I said, "Oh, so you're asking me to do it?" "Well, no, I need someone who can play classical music." Because
you can do it.
They don't know that that's how I started my college career, as a classical piano major. I don't look like a classical pianist. Therefore, I must not be able to do it.
Right.
Yeah, I've seen it personally on several different levels, and I'm not hesitant to clear it up when I see it, because otherwise it's not going to change. If I just take it, then it's not going to change. My parents had to take it. Sammy Davis Jr. had to take it so that I don't have to anymore.
Marty.
This is switching just a little bit. I keep looking at this issue and this argument about affirmative action in terms of college admissions, et cetera, et cetera. And the one thing that's always baffled me is the people that argue against it, saying, you know, you're replacing somebody that's more qualified, while at the same time they're letting in all these legacy students or students whose parents gave a lot of money, which perpetuates the problem in the first place. That, I mean, that's affirmative action for people that have money and influence.
I agree with you. I saw it. I've taught in almost every college that's in this area, so I've seen it numerous times. I'm completely with you. I'm looking through the handout because there was something that I wrote down there. Yes, and it's going to go toward your comment about, well, we're hiring somebody who may not be as qualified and letting another person lose the job. Every single person here, I don't know you, but I know this. Every single person here has somewhere throughout the course of their life worked with someone that didn't need to be in their job. Every single one of you have worked with someone that didn't need to be, that you looked at them and you thought, how did you get this job? When are you going to be fired?
Nowadays.
Every single one of you have done that. And that means that whoever hired them took a chance on them. What I wrote down is you have to take a chance on everybody that's hired. Hiring them is taking a chance on them. So to say, well, this person is not as talented as this person, you don't know that. You're taking a chance on someone, just like you've taken a chance on every other person that said, yes, I'm writing. Yes, I will take this job. You know, back when we could write things is before we had computers. Yes, so I'm with you. That's a frustrating situation. And I think it's ridiculous to say we're taking a chance on a Black person. You're taking a chance on every single person that is hired.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I've seen plenty of these legacy students. I went to a private university where legacy is the name of the game. And
right.
And I look at these people and say, you don't belong here whatsoever. But their daddy had money, or there's a building named after them, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And people will vehemently oppose preferential admission for Black people, but they live with this other preferential admission.
You are absolutely correct. It's I would remind incoming freshmen often when I was at colleges that this is a business. We like to think that it's cool, it's school, it's university. So we're here to learn. It's a business. Don't fool yourself on this.
No.
And you are you're our product. And there are going to be some schools that are going to say, well, this product is going to bring us more money. That's a fact. That doesn't make it right, but then maybe you make a choice as to what school you go to based on that. You know, Bev asked the question about how do we teach kids these types of things. Maybe things like that is brought into question. I know people with children who made specific decisions about where they took their kids to school based on what kind of diversity was at the school.
Kellan, do you have your hand up?
I do.
Oh, okay.
First of all, I want to thank you, Wendell, for being here over your reluctance to be here. And I actually first met you when you were playing a gig at Raintree Assisted Living, where my mother-in-law lived, and since she passed in December, no longer lives there. But I will tell you that you put lots of smiles on faces, and just thank you for that. It was a
Thank you,
wonderful
and
evening.
hey, pass that on to Pastor Reynolds that I put smiles on faces.
Absolutely, you did. You put smiles on lots of faces, and I saw people reacting who hadn't reacted to things in a long time. So thank you. And I'm almost reluctant to say anything to you because you think so quick on your feet that I'm afraid I can't keep up with you, but I'll give it a whirl. But I hear all that you're saying. And one point that I will go back to, I think it was Carol, the educator, am I correct? That she was talking about, you know, do we do right by our students of color? And I think one of the very positives of affirmative action, and I know that it covers other things besides just hiring regulations, because it does help bankroll training in sexual harassment and anti-racism and cultural competence and all those things, which are just very, very important. But I think the backwash is, and it's a really good thing, that if young men and women of color know that there are opportunities and they can compete on an equal footing, an equal playing field with the dominant culture, whatever that is, then that feeds back to teachers. And suddenly it's like, oh, you know, we're not preparing these kids for, you know, plumbing or you know, basic wage jobs. We're preparing them to go into the workplace, and there's a place for them when they get there. And that's very important. And I spent 35 years in education, and that message needs to get spoken, because you know, that whole tracking mentality is still out there. And you know, we are not doing right by any of our students if we begin to peg them in the 5th grade or the 6th grade or the 7th grade and say, okay, this kid's aiming for that, and that's all. So, you know, I think that's one of the biggest pluses of affirmative action.
Yes, I agree with you on all those things. And as you were saying these things, I was thinking through different experiences that I've had with that, and different situations that I've seen that are similar. Let me discuss that. When the Me Too movement was as strong as it was, at the height of the Me Too movement, a woman that I knew really, really well, that I worked with a lot, came to me and said, what are your thoughts on this? And I said, no, absolutely, I'm completely behind this movement. And she said, but you haven't said anything anywhere. You're not on Facebook. You're not talking about it. Why aren't you talking about it? Why haven't you gone to a rally? And I said, well, because I think that your movement's going to be stronger if you are supporting yourselves instead of having a man come over and do it. And I think now that I was wrong, because this is what Black people are asking white people to do. Well, if you believe in this, then stand in here with us. Get in the circle with us. I see now that I think I blew an opportunity there. I have heard about an organization. I don't recall the name of the organization. It's a organization that makes movies. And the plan behind this organization is to see to it that every person, from the director to the smallest assistant, are all female. To show people to show women that these are jobs that you can do, because the thought process was, if you don't see it, then you don't know. So I think you're saying the same thing about African-American kids, or kids in general, that that if there's a world you want to see, then we should put it in front of them. Yes, I agree with that. But let me add to that. Teaching the kids to speak up about what they're not seeing. Teaching the kids to speak up. Because if we just continue on and someone says, hey, excuse me, and we ignore that, or we don't satisfy that answer, then we're helping the problem. In college, I was with my counselor. Well, I don't remember the term that you used, but I was with that person, and I was one class short of an elective. And I remember him looking at me. It's my second year in college, and I remember him looking at me and saying, without asking me a question, looking at me and saying, "Oh, okay. Well, why don't we just put you in basketball? That'll be fine, right?"
No.
I didn't find it funny. And I looked at him and said, "No.
Don't play
How about a music class or something in the arts?" "Oh, well, I mean, if you like that, I do like that." Now, my classes, if he's looking at my course load, it's filled with music classes. Why then would you say basketball? Now, yeah, he's an idiot, but I had to speak up,
Yeah, that's right.
or else I'm letting that happen. The teachers, yeah, there's a lot that they can be doing to make it better, but please teach the children to speak up too.
Yeah, you know, Wendell, I think to Bev's point earlier and to your point, I think if the white parents in all of these schools here in Knox County went to the school board and said, "Why don't we have more teachers of color?" If enough powerful, influential white people went and did that and demanded it, something might change. It's going to take that, I think.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's not going to come from the Black people, because that'll be a movement.
Right. I want to pause right here. Caroline Buckner, are you okay? Caroline? I think she fell asleep. Okay.
People do that with me.
Yeah, they do it with Tim too.
Yeah, really
You
good. Just every Sunday morning. Every Sunday morning.
You don't have to tell me.
Well, we want to thank you, Wendell, for being here tonight and for leading our discussion. It's been wonderfully enlightening. And,
Hey, Tim, can I say something real quick before you finish?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Yes, when Tim came to me and asked me about this, there was a long back and forth of texts with me saying why I didn't want to do it and how angry I was about the whole situation. And I didn't hold back because I've known Tim as one of my best friends in life. So I had no problem saying all this to him. What convinced me was him saying, "Yeah, but I think there's a group of people here that are going to be part of this that want to make a difference, that will make a difference. And those are the people that you need to talk to." And it was him saying that about you guys that made me say, okay, and he was not wrong. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Except for the person sleeping.
Yeah, we'll check on her. If one of you folks in
I can do that.
Buckingham can go check on her, that would be great.
I can do that. I will go check on her.
Thank you. So Wendell, thank you again for being here and for being willing to come and talk to us despite your misgivings. And I do hope, folks, that this does lead to action somewhere, and we're going to be talking about that in 2 weeks. I'm really praying, you know, as Wendell said, how many catalysts do we need? And it seems like my entire life, I preached about this a few weeks ago, and certainly going back before I was born, but certainly my entire adult life, there has been one thing after another. There's been outrage, there's been uproar, and then we just went back to life the way it was. And I'm praying that this is a different moment, but it will only be different if we do something about it. And so I'm hoping that this leads to some sort of action. All right. Don't forget, we are not in person on Sunday. We were supposed to come back in person. Those of you who are at Second, I don't know about the rest of you, but if you're at Second, we're not going to be worshiping in person. We will be worshiping together online for another month. And then we will hopefully, if we can flatten the curve, get back together in September. So thanks for being here, all of you, and go in peace to love and serve the Lord. Appreciate it.
Amen.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bob.
Wendell.
Thank you.
Good job.
Tim.
Bye, Mom.
Oh.
Bye, Mom.
That's so precious.
Hey, Wendell, stick around a second, if you don't
No
mind.
problem. No problem. I will entertain you while we're waiting.
Well, that'll keep people here. Now, see, now people aren't leaving.
Yeah, well, sorry. I didn't realize I was causing trouble.
You're giving that up for free, man. Save it for tomorrow night.